The galaxy had never known silence until the humans came. Not the silence of peace, nor the silence of death, but the terrible stillness that falls when predators enter the field. The Kavar Dominion had once believed themselves untouchable. Their fleet stretched across 100 systems, their armies forged from worlds that had never known hunger or hardship. They had never fought for survival, only for expansion. Their warships gleamed like jewels against the void, polished and perfect, untouched by true combat. But when they made war upon humanity, that perfection shattered. It began in the Norix Expanse, a cluster of mining colonies the Dominion had taken by force. The Galactic Council had voted against intervention. They claimed Earth was too new, too volatile, too savage to be trusted in the fight. The humans did not respond with protest. They responded with deployment. The first to arrive was the 3rd Terran Expeditionary Fleet, under the command of Admiral Juno Kor. Her ships emerged from warp like a storm breaking through night, black, steel and matte hulls swallowing starlight instead of reflecting it. The Dominion ships opened fire immediately, confident their plasma lances and energy shields would overwhelm the newcomers. They had fought hundreds of species, crushed a dozen rebellions. They had never faced soldiers who treated the void as if it were a battlefield instead of a graveyard. The first volley struck the TSS Typhon and dissipated harmlessly against ablative plating layered like bone. The second volley found itself swallowed by point defense cannons so fast the Dominion gunners thought their targeting systems had malfunctioned. Then the humans fired back. Railguns spoke in thunder, hurling tungsten slugs the size of transports at a fraction of light speed. Kinetic energy, raw and unglamorous, tore through shields that were never designed to stop something so primitive. Dominion cruisers vanished in blossoms of molten vapor, their communications filled with confusion and disbelief. The humans did not broadcast warnings. They did not taunt. They moved like predators in tall grass, weapons speaking in the only language they respected: efficiency. Within 7 minutes, the entire Kivar detachment at Norix was annihilated. Not a single human ship lost power. The fleet drifted in silence as wreckage turned slowly around them, the broken light of burning hulls flickering across the Terran insignia. Admiral Kor gave a single order: "Transmit coordinates. Tell them Norix is ours again." Back on Earth, the message arrived at the Terran Strategic Command, buried under the Himalayas. Generals, admirals, and scientists gathered around the holographic display as Kor's report unfolded in silence. They had all known this would happen sooner or later. Humanity had built its fleet not to conquer, but to make sure it would never again kneel. "So it begins," whispered General Havel. "The galaxy's about to learn what Deathworlders are." The word had once been an insult. Now it was a badge. Humanity came from a planet that tried to kill them from the moment they were born. Every storm, every virus, every clawed predator had been a lesson in endurance. The Council had called them unfit for interstellar diplomacy. They were right. Humanity wasn't fit for peace. It was built for survival. The Dominion responded as expected, with fury. Within days, a counter-fleet 3 times larger than the Terran force arrived at Norix. They sent a message to the humans demanding surrender and reparations for aggression. Yet, Admiral Kor simply watched the transmission and said, "Begin recording." Then she walked to the viewport, where the stars gleamed cold and indifferent, and spoke into the open channel. "This is Admiral Kor of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We do not surrender. We do not pay. We survive. And if you wish to test the worth of your fleets, then by all means, enter the field." The channel went dark. When the Dominion fleet advanced, the stars themselves seemed to vanish behind the smoke of burning ships, the void filled with screams and static. But through it all, one thing stood out: the silence of human comms. No panic. No chaos. Each Terran squadron moved as if part of a single organism, their formations tightening, engines flaring white-hot. When a destroyer was struck, it did not retreat. It drifted forward, emptying every weapon it had before detonating in a flare that consumed 3 enemy cruisers. When boarding parties stormed human ships, they found no trembling officers, only Marines in sealed exosuits whose armor bore scratches from beasts that would have killed a Kavar soldier in seconds. The boarding parties never reported back. In the aftermath, the Dominion fleet's command ship Araxon Prime drifted crippled, its hull torn open like the carcass of some deep-sea leviathan. The Terran flagship Typhon latched on with magnetic claws, cutting its way in. Admiral Kor led the boarding herself, her breath steady beneath her helmet. The Dominion admiral, a towering creature with crystalline armor, stared at her in disbelief. "You fight like monsters," he spat. "You destroy without honor." Kor's visor retracted, revealing eyes cold as the void. "Monsters?" she repeated softly. "We're what your ancestors prayed would never leave their homeworlds." Then she drew her sidearm and ended the war for Norix with a single shot. The footage spread across the galaxy in hours. Every species saw the same image: Terran soldiers walking through fire, dragging wounded enemies to safety, planting banners not of conquest, but of survival. The Council panicked. What if the humans decided not to stop? What if they turned their gaze toward the core worlds? Debates raged across systems, some calling for alliances, others for extermination. But the stars did not answer. They only burned silently as humanity's fleets gathered strength. On Earth, new shipyards came alive, orbiting in lines like metallic constellations. Entire continents united under a single military directive. The Terran Defense Accord, once a defensive pact, became something far greater: the Terran Alliance. Its motto was simple: "When we stand, the stars tremble." Months later, Dominion scouts spotted something impossible: entire asteroid belts being converted into mobile ship foundries. Deathworld engineering had no equal. Where other species built delicate vessels of light alloys and shield matrices, humans forged monsters of steel, mass, and fury. The Titan-class dreadnoughts were said to warp gravity itself when they moved. The galaxy watched in dread as the first of them, the TSS Leviathan, entered service. It did not travel through slipspace like other ships. It punched a hole through reality with a drive so unstable that even Terran scientists called it the Madman's Door. When the Leviathan emerged at the edge of Dominion space, entire fleets scrambled to intercept. None returned. The war that followed was no longer a contest of armies. It was a lesson written across the stars. Worlds that once mocked humanity's savage origins now whispered prayers for mercy. None came. The humans did not exterminate, but they dismantled. Every Dominion shipyard was seized, every slave world liberated, every command network dismantled. And through it all, they remained silent. No propaganda, no speeches, just action. The stars fell silent because, for the first time, they witnessed a species that didn't fight for glory or empire, but because that's what they had always done to survive. By the time the Council convened an emergency summit to discuss the Terran problem, it was too late. The humans had already moved beyond Norix. Their fleets were at the gates of the Kavar homeworld, and as the alien delegates shouted and blamed each other, one phrase kept returning across every broadcast, whispered like a prayer and a curse both: "The Deathworlders are in the field." And when Deathworlders took the field, the stars themselves grew quiet. ChatGPT said, "The Dominion's homeworld of Kavaris glowed like a blood-red star in the void, a planet of oceans and spires, of arrogance and power, where the most powerful of the alien species had ruled for centuries." From orbit, the Terran fleet could see the lattice of orbital defense platforms encircling it like thorns, each one armed with weapons that could tear apart moons. To the rest of the galaxy, it was impregnable. To the humans, it was just another challenge. Admiral Juno Kor stood on the bridge of the Leviathan, the first Titan-class dreadnought ever constructed. Its hull was kilometers thick, forged from carbonized tungsten and layered ablative plating. The Kavar Dominion had once described humans as clever apes armed with sticks. Now those same apes stood poised to end a civilization that had outlived 1,000 empires. The silence on the bridge was heavy. Beyond the viewport, the defensive grid shimmered, hundreds of ships forming a living wall. Kor's fleet was smaller, barely one-third the size of the Dominion Armada, but every Terran ship was a fortress unto itself. Kor's voice broke the tension. "Fleet command to all wings," she said calmly. "No quarter, no retreat. This ends here." The communications net came alive with the deep hum of acknowledgement. Captains, squad leaders, pilots, all responding with the same grim reverence. The Deathworlders did not shout or cheer. They prepared. Every motion deliberate, every system aligned with the Predator's patience. The humans had learned long ago that battle wasn't about rage. It was about control. The Dominion opened fire first. Plasma lances flared from the ring of defense platforms, raking through space like sunfire. The beams tore through the black, converging on the Leviathan's position. Shields flared, bending under the impact, but they held. Then came the human reply, a ripple across the void, as if space itself exhaled. Dozens of Terran ships launched kinetic salvos, tungsten rods wrapped in magnetic fields, fired from railguns whose recoil could crack asteroids. The first wave tore through the Dominion's front line. The second wave hit the platforms. The third was overkill. Kor's voice remained steady. "Target their command structure. If they lose coordination, they'll panic." And they did. From the surface of Kavaris, the skies became a furnace. Civilians watched in horror as streaks of light traced across the heavens, the war playing out in their atmosphere. The Dominion's High Chancellor, a being of translucent crystal, shouted into his comms, "They can't breach the inner defense ring. No species can." His aides said nothing. They watched the impossible unfold. Terran dropships punching through orbit, descending like meteors, escorted by squadrons of fighter craft that moved with inhuman precision. Each dropship carried a company of Deathworlder infantry, armored in black and silver, hearts steady, eyes sharp. They didn't believe in luck. They believed in momentum. When the first human boots touched Kavar soil, the war changed forever. Dominion soldiers were larger, faster, armed with advanced plasma rifles, but they had never fought a species that used terrain like a weapon. The humans adapted instantly, turning ruins into fortresses, gravity wells into choke points, plasma craters into ambush traps. They fought with everything the Death World had given them. When ammunition ran low, they improvised. When communication lines were jammed, they used instinct. Dominion soldiers who had mocked the barbarian apes began to whisper another word. Ghosts. Captain Elias Thorne, leading the 22nd Ground Division, crouched behind the shattered wing of a downed Dominion gunship. His visor flickered with targeting data. "Company B, advance on my mark," he said, voice low and calm. Around him the air shimmered with heat, plasma bolts slicing past. "Now!" The humans surged forward. They didn't charge. They flowed. Every movement calculated. Every bullet placed with precision. The Dominion had numbers. Humanity had will. When the two met, will won. Within hours, the outer defenses of the capital city fell. In orbit, Admiral Kor coordinated the bombardment with surgical precision. The Leviathan's main rail batteries fired once every 42 seconds, each shot calculated to disable, not destroy. She wasn't here to glass a planet. She was here to end an empire. "Status of ground forces?" she asked. "City perimeter breached," replied her operations officer. "Thorne's units are pushing toward the Citadel." Kor nodded. "Then we hold the line. They need time to finish this." She turned to the viewport, watching as the Leviathan's shadow passed over the Dominion's most sacred continent. The stars beyond seemed dimmer now. Even the cosmos held its breath. Down below, Thorne's squad reached the Citadel gates. The massive structure pulsed with energy, a mix of crystal and metal architecture that glittered even through the smoke. Dominion defenders held strong, but fear was visible in their movements. "Captain, air support ETA 30 seconds, a Marine shouted. "Negative?" Thorn replied. "We go now." He leapt from cover, his rifle blazing, moving like a man possessed. Behind him, Terran soldiers followed without hesitation. Plasma tore through the air, burning streaks across their armor. They didn't stop. They never stopped. The Deathworlders didn't fear pain. Pain was just proof they were still alive. When the Citadel gates finally fell, the roar of collapsing stone echoed across the valley. Inside, the High Chancellor awaited, surrounded by guards and advisors. Thorn entered with his weapon lowered, not out of mercy but respect. "You can surrender," he said quietly. "We don't need to destroy you." The Chancellor's crystalline form flickered with disbelief. "You could have killed us all," he whispered. Thorn nodded once. "We could have, but we're not here to conquer. We're here to end the cycle." At that same moment, Admiral Kor received the message. The Dominion capital had fallen. The war was over. She stood silently on the bridge of the Leviathan, watching the data scroll across her screen. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion fleet began to power down. No one spoke. Then Kor gave a single command. "Signal the Council." Across the void, communications arrays came alive. 1,000 worlds listened as Kor's voice filled the channels. "The war is done. The Dominion has fallen. Humanity will not claim their worlds. But we will not forget this day. Let it be known. When Deathworlders take the field, the stars themselves fall silent." In the aftermath, the silence lingered. Across the galaxy, the Council reconvened in emergency session. Entire species that had once mocked humanity now spoke of them in reverent tones. Reports from Kavaris described humans rebuilding hospitals, distributing food, repairing power grids. They had fought like demons but rebuilt like saints. The council chair, a venerable being with centuries of political experience, watched the transmission in disbelief. "They destroyed an empire," he murmured, and then began healing it. Another delegate whispered, "Maybe that's what makes them terrifying." Weeks later, the Terran fleet withdrew. The Leviathan led the way, its engines flaring white against the dark. Admiral Kor stood in her command room, overlooking the wreckage that still orbited Kavaris. "We didn't come for glory," she said softly to her officers. "We came because they forced our hand. Remember that." She paused, looking out into the starfield. "The galaxy is watching us now. Let's make sure they never forget what humanity is capable of, both in war and in mercy." Far below, Captain Thorn watched the last Terran shuttle depart. The Selkari aide beside him, once an enemy, bowed deeply. "You could have destroyed us," she said. "Why didn't you?" Thorn looked at the sky where the Leviathan vanished into the void. "Because if we destroy everything that threatens us," he said, "we become the thing we were fighting." The aide said nothing more. She understood. When the last Terran ship vanished from the system, Kavaris was left in a strange quiet. The stars still burned, but their light felt dimmer, subdued, as if the universe itself had witnessed something it could never fully comprehend. Humanity had proven itself beyond question. They were Deathworlders, yes, but more than that, they were the reminder that the galaxy's peace had been built on fragility, and that sometimes it took monsters to preserve it. And as the galaxy whispered its new prayer, "May the Deathworlders never take the field again," the humans returned to the cold dark of space, silent, steady, and unbroken. They didn't need the stars to speak their name anymore. The silence was enough. In the weeks following the fall of the Dominion, the galaxy felt wrong in its quiet. Where once there had been endless chatter across the council channels, trade disputes, border arguments, endless declarations of superiority, now there was only a hushed reverence. The humans had broken an empire that had lasted millennia, and they had done it without burning the galaxy down. The Leviathan returned to Earth orbit under a sky that shimmered with thousands of satellites, each one transmitting images of the homeworld that had birthed the Deathworlders. The people of Earth didn't cheer. There were no parades, no victory broadcasts. Humanity had fought too long and lost too much to celebrate. They simply rebuilt. But the rest of the galaxy did not know how to interpret this silence. To them, victory without celebration was unnatural. The Kivar Dominion's survivors sent envoys bearing apologies and reparations. Dozens of smaller empires scrambled to form treaties with the Terran Alliance. Even the Galactic Council, which had once refused to seat humanity at its table, now begged for their participation. In the council chambers, the delegates spoke in fear more than admiration. "They could have annihilated Kavaris," one whispered. "They could have turned that world to glass," another replied. "And that's what terrifies me most. They didn't." On Earth, Admiral Juno Kor stood in the Terran Assembly Hall, a cavernous structure built into the cliffs above the Pacific. Before her sat the Unified Command, a council of scientists, generals, and diplomats from every human colony. The room was dimly lit, holographic projections of the stars hovering above their heads. "The Council has offered us a permanent seat," one diplomat announced. "They want us to lead the Defense Charter." "They're frightened, Juno. They want us on their side before someone else decides to challenge us." Kor crossed her arms. "They don't want us on their side," she said quietly. "They want us contained. It's the oldest strategy in history. Invite the predator into the village so it doesn't eat anyone else." The room fell silent. General Arden Voss, grizzled and broad-shouldered, leaned forward. "We can't isolate ourselves forever. Sooner or later, we'll have to decide what kind of power we're going to be." Kor turned toward him. "You've seen what happens when we fight. You've seen what the galaxy becomes when we take the field. Do you really think they'll ever see us as anything but a weapon?" Voss didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth hung between them like a blade. Humanity had proven it could win any war. But peace was a different kind of battlefield. While Earth debated, the rest of the galaxy began to move again. On the edge of Dominion space, remnants of the old regime gathered in secret. They called themselves the Sons of Kavar, a coalition of warlords, admirals, and generals who refused to accept defeat. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Varun Teth, had survived the fall of the Citadel. He had watched humans march through his capital, their silent discipline cutting deeper than any weapon. Now he wanted vengeance. "They humiliated us," he growled to his followers. "They call us weak. But I have seen their limits. They bleed, they die, and they will die again." He activated a holo map showing the rim systems. "We strike where they are weakest. Their colonies, their supply lines, their compassion." Meanwhile, aboard the Leviathan, Kor prepared for departure. The dreadnought had been ordered to patrol the outer systems, a show of strength to remind the galaxy that humanity was still watching. As she walked the bridge, she paused beside a viewport. Earth floated below, blue and fragile, surrounded by the scars of construction. She had fought to protect it, but sometimes she wondered from what. "Admiral," said her communications officer, "we've received a council request. They want us to assist in stabilizing former Dominion worlds. Piracy, uprisings, chaos." Kor frowned. "Send a reply," she said. "We'll help, but on our terms." Out among the stars, the chaos was spreading faster than the Council could contain it. Slave races freed from the Dominion's control were now rising against their former masters. Planets once bound by fear were tasting independence and blood. The humans arrived in transports, not warships this time, bringing engineers and mediators, medics and aid convoys. To the liberated, they were saviors. To the Dominion remnants, they were demons. Kor's forces landed on the shattered world of Karun, once a Dominion shipyard, now a smoldering ruin of rebellion. She met with the local governor, a nervous insectoid creature who trembled as he spoke. "We didn't ask for your help," he hissed. "We don't want Deathworlders on our soil." Kor simply nodded. "You'll want us when the Sons of Kavar arrive." The governor didn't believe her. Not until the sky caught fire. The Sons of Kavar struck at dawn, their ships emerging from the shadow of the planet's rings. Orbital stations exploded before anyone could raise shields. Fighters screamed through the atmosphere, raining fire on the settlements below. The humans were outnumbered 10-1, caught off guard, their supply lines severed. But the Deathworlders didn't retreat. They dug in. Kor's voice came through every channel, steady as ever. "You all know what we are," she said. "You all know what we came from. Make the ground ours. Make them come to us. Captain Elias Thorne led the defense of the northern settlements. His soldiers took position in the burned-out skeletons of shipyards, using twisted metal for cover. They think we're cornered, he told his squad. They think fear works the same on us as it does on them. Let's show them they're wrong. The first wave of Sons of Kavar infantry descended in drop pods, sleek and fast. The humans waited until they hit the ground. Then they opened fire. Every shot was deliberate. Every kill earned. When their weapons overheated, they switched to blades. When they ran out of ammunition, they used gravity charges, makeshift traps built from wreckage. By the time the second wave arrived, the first had already been buried. In orbit, the Leviathan engaged the enemy fleet. The Dominion remnants fought with desperation, their ships darting through debris fields like cornered predators. But desperation could not match discipline. Human gunners worked in silence, tracking targets through the chaos. The dreadnought's massive rail batteries boomed once every minute, each shot ripping through enemy formations. Still, there were too many. Corps' tactical officer turned to her. "Admiral, if they breach the upper atmosphere—" "They won't," Corps said sharply. She looked to her comms officer. "Patch me to Thorne." On the surface, Thorne crouched behind a half-collapsed wall listening to the sky rumble. "Admiral," he said, panting, "we're holding, but they're pressing hard." Corps' voice was calm. "Understood. You've done enough. Pull your forces back to the evacuation point." Thorne looked over the ridge. The Sons of Kavar were advancing in waves, their weapons blazing, their war cries echoing. "No, Admiral," he said quietly. "We hold the line." Before she could respond, he cut the channel. Thorne rallied his soldiers for one final stand. Smoke rose in pillars around them, the ground scorched black. "This is what we were made for," he said. "Not for medals, not for glory, for this moment." The Deathworlders stood shoulder to shoulder as the next wave came. Plasma bolts scorched their armor, shockwaves threw them from their feet, but they rose again and again. To the Sons of Kavar it looked like madness. To the humans, it was survival. When the Leviathan finally broke through the enemy blockade, Corps ordered an orbital strike. Rail slugs burned through the sky, slamming into enemy drop zones with surgical precision. The earth quaked. Fire consumed the horizon, and through the inferno, Thorne and his surviving troops emerged, scarred, bloodied, but unbroken. The Sons of Kavar were gone. The battle for Karun lasted 12 hours. The aftermath would last generations. When the dust cleared, the human flag stood over the ruined city. Corps landed soon after, walking through the wreckage in silence. Thorne met her at the base of a fallen tower. "We lost half the regiment," he said softly. "But the planet's secure." Corps looked at him for a long moment. "Half," she echoed. "And we're still standing." "That's what they'll never understand." That night, from orbit, Karun burned like a dying ember. Across the galaxy, the Council watched the broadcast in silence. The message was clear. The Deathworlders were not conquerors. They were inevitability. And when they took the field, no star dared shine too brightly. ChatGPT said the galaxy held its breath in the weeks following Karun. No one had expected the humans to win that battle. They were outnumbered, outgunned, cornered in the ruins of a dying planet. And yet they had not only survived, they had turned the tide. The Council's broadcasts tried to frame it as a joint effort, but everyone knew the truth. The Deathworlders had stood alone. The Karun footage spread faster than any declaration ever had. Grainy images of human soldiers fighting through firestorms, dragging wounded allies from collapsing structures, refusing to retreat even as the ground turned molten beneath them. It terrified the galaxy, and worse, it inspired it. On a dozen worlds, suppressed species rose up against their masters, shouting the same phrase that had echoed across Karun's scorched plains. "Hold the line." The phrase became a symbol. It appeared on banners, graffiti, and encrypted transmissions. For the first time in centuries, the Council's authority began to fracture. Old rivalries reignited. Former dominions whispered of independence, and in the dark, someone was watching it all unfold. The remnants of the Sons of Kavar, broken but not destroyed, now operating in shadows and silence. In the vast marble halls of the Galactic Council, the tension was thick enough to taste. Representatives argued across the chamber floor, their voices rising in shrill, overlapping tones. The holoscreens showed endless footage of Karun, of human dreadnoughts hovering like gods of war over burning cities. "We must act before it's too late," hissed the Varn representative, his carapace glinting under the light. "You've seen what they can do. They call themselves protectors, but they are conquerors waiting for a reason." "Protectors," another voice echoed bitterly, belonging to the Delari matron, her translucent skin shimmering faintly. "Tell me, counselor, when was the last time one of your fleets defended a world without demanding tribute afterward? The humans asked for nothing." "Exactly," shouted the Varn. "No one fights for nothing. That's what makes them dangerous. They hide their hunger behind mercy." At the center of the chamber, the High Speaker's voice cut through the noise like thunder. "Enough!" The delegates fell silent. The speaker was an ancient being. Its voice carried through a mechanical chorus that gave each word weight. "The humans have offered no aggression toward us. Their admiral has accepted our request for stabilization missions and has not claimed a single world in their name. But make no mistake, the balance has shifted. And when balance shifts, empires fall." Behind the speaker, massive doors opened. The chamber guard stood aside as a human entered. Admiral Juno Kor, in her Black Fleet uniform, strode into the room. The delegates quieted immediately. She didn't carry a weapon, but her presence was as heavy as a loaded rifle. "Admiral," the speaker intoned, "you honor us. We wish to thank humanity for its service in restoring order." "I didn't come for gratitude," Kor interrupted, her voice calm but sharp. "I came because your borders are burning, and your fleets are too busy debating to put them out." A murmur spread through the chamber. "You think this ends with the Dominion?" she continued. "You think the sons of Kavar are the last ones who'll challenge you? You're wrong. They're just the beginning. The cracks are spreading through your systems faster than you can seal them. And when the next war comes, and it will, you won't survive it without us." The Varn delegate stood. "Then what are you proposing, human? That we kneel? That we name you protectors of the galaxy?" Kor's eyes narrowed. "I'm proposing you stop pretending we're enemies. You made that mistake once before." Then she turned to leave. The doors closed behind her, leaving the council chamber in tense silence. Outside, in orbit over Terra Prime, the Leviathan prepared for another deployment. The ship was more than a vessel. It was a statement. Its hull was reinforced with blackened alloy mined from the bones of asteroids. Its engines powered by fusion cores designed to operate under the gravitational pressure of neutron stars. When it entered a system, the local suns dimmed as though paying respect. Kor stood on the command deck, gazing at the stars. "They still fear us," said General Voss, joining her. "They should," she replied. "Fear keeps them careful." "Careful doesn't mean loyal," Voss said quietly. "Half the council wants us gone. The other half wants to use us. And the sons of Kavar, they're regrouping. We've intercepted chatter across 3 sectors. They're planning something big." Kor didn't turn. "Then we'll be bigger." In the shadowed regions of space, far from council patrol routes, the sons of Kavar gathered. They had no empire, no fleets large enough to challenge the humans directly, but they had something far more dangerous: ideology. Varun Teth, once a Dominion general, now the leader of the Sons, addressed his followers from the bridge of a stolen cruiser. "They call themselves Deathworlders," he snarled, "and the galaxy bows before them. But we know the truth. They are not gods. They are beasts wearing armor. If they can be feared, they can be broken." His plan was simple in its cruelty. If they could not defeat humanity in open war, they would make the galaxy turn against them. They began orchestrating terror strikes under human transponder codes, targeting neutral colonies and outposts. Ships were found burned, settlements slaughtered, and each time the survivors swore they had seen Terran symbols in the smoke. Panic spread like wildfire. Council worlds began cutting ties, canceling trade routes, fortifying borders. Back on Earth, the reports piled up. Admiral Kor stood before a dozen holoscreens, each one showing a different disaster. a trade convoy destroyed near the rim, a medical station bombed in orbit of a refugee moon, a council envoy murdered in transit. "They're framing us," said Elias Thorne, now promoted to colonel after Karun. "And it's working." Kor clenched her jaw. "Then we'll show them the truth. Prepare Task Force Orion. We're going hunting." The humans didn't wait for council permission. The Leviathan led a fleet of dreadnoughts and carriers deep into uncharted space, tracking the sons of Kavar through the debris fields of forgotten wars. For days they followed faint energy trails, ghost signals, until they found them. An armada of stolen ships hiding in the wreckage of an old battlefield, hundreds strong. "They've been using the graves of their own dead as camouflage," Thorne murmured. "Then let's make it a tomb," Kor said. The battle that followed was one the galaxy would remember in whispers. The human fleet descended in silence. No war cries, no warnings. The sons of Kavar opened fire first, their ships forming a defensive web around their flagship. Rail slugs from the Leviathan cut through the void like thunderbolts. Entire cruisers broke apart in seconds, their molten cores spilling light across the darkness. But the sons were desperate. They hurled everything they had, mines, drones, suicide skiffs. The human lines buckled but did not break. In the midst of the chaos, Thorne led a boarding assault on the enemy flagship. His unit breached the hull, fighting through corridors thick with smoke and shrapnel. "You don't have to do this," he shouted, as he confronted Varun Teth in the ship's command chamber. "It's over," Varun laughed, blood dripping from his mandibles. "Over? You think destroying me will stop this? You've already lost, human. The galaxy will never trust you again." "Maybe not," Thorne said, leveling his weapon. "But they'll survive to decide that for themselves." The shot echoed through the chamber. Varun Teth fell, and with him, the last organized resistance of the Dominion. When the smoke cleared, the human fleet stood alone in the silent graveyard of ships. Kor watched from the bridge as debris drifted past. "Transmit to the council," she ordered. "Tell them it's done." The reply came hours later. The council's message was short, almost trembling. "We thank you, Admiral, but please, return to your own borders. The galaxy needs time to heal." Kor stood there for a long time before replying. "Understood." That night, the Leviathan turned back toward Earth. The galaxy slept uneasily, knowing the Deathworlders were watching. They had saved the stars again, but even the stars seemed afraid to thank them aloud. The stars burned quietly in the dark sea of space, their light muted by distance and dust. The war was over. The sons of Kavar were gone, their fleets shattered, their leaders dead or in hiding. The galaxy should have celebrated peace, but it didn't. In every corridor of power, in every council hall, there was an unease that could not be named. Humanity had won again, and that victory had not come with banners or anthems. It came with silence. That silence frightened them more than the roar of war ever had. Admiral Juno Kor stood on the bridge of the Leviathan, her reflection dim in the cold glass as the blue light of Earth glimmered below. Around her the crew worked in disciplined quiet, their movements practiced and precise. "Status?" she asked. "Fleet secure," replied her comms officer. "Evacuation operations on Karun complete. All remaining Dominion technology confiscated. We've sent the final reports to the Council." Kor nodded, though her eyes never left the planet beneath them. "And the Council's response?" "Gratitude," the officer said, hesitating. "And an official request that all Terran fleets remain within Sol jurisdiction until further notice." That drew a quiet laugh from General Voss, who had been leaning against a console nearby. "In other words, they want the monsters to stay in their cage." Kor didn't smile. "They're scared. And scared people make bad decisions. Across the galaxy, those bad decisions were already unfolding." The Council's lesser powers, terrified of another human-led intervention, began forming their own coalitions. Defense pacts, weapon treaties, secret shipyards. They thought they could arm themselves quietly, but nothing in the galaxy was hidden from Terran intelligence anymore. The humans saw everything. They said nothing. Meanwhile, on the world of Daxor Prime, where the Council held its rotating seat, The whispers grew louder. "They don't want peace," muttered a delegate in the marble hallways. "They want obedience." Another replied, "The Deathworlders will not stop until they rule us all." But even as they whispered, their ships still patrolled under Terran protection. Their trade convoys still flew beneath the safety of human escort routes, and their people still lived because human soldiers had died to make it so. Fear had a way of forgetting debts. On Earth, the Terran Assembly convened under the shadow of its great glass dome, with the Pacific shimmering beyond. Holograms of colonies and star systems floated above the central platform. The mood was solemn, not triumphant. "We've received confirmation," said Director Liang, head of Terran Intelligence. "The Council is preparing to limit our ship movements. They call it a stabilization mandate. In reality, it's containment." Voss slammed his fist on the table. "Containment? After all we've done? After all the blood we've spilled to save them?" Kor leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "It's fear, not hatred. They don't hate us. They can't. They need us. But they also can't stand the thought of needing us forever. It eats at them?" "What do you propose?" asked Liang. Kor looked up at the holographic stars. "We give them what they think they want." The silence that followed was sharp. "You mean withdraw?" "Yes," she said. "Pull back all fleets. Bring our ships home. Stop patrolling their borders. Let them govern their own skies. Let them see what the galaxy looks like without Deathworlders standing in the dark." The vote passed. Not easily, but decisively. Over the next 6 months, humanity withdrew from nearly every Council-aligned system. Terran convoys stopped appearing in orbit. Human soldiers packed up their forward bases and vanished into the void. The once bustling trade routes dimmed. Pirate raids began again. Small wars erupted on the rim, where human presence had once kept order through fear alone. Refugee ships sent distress calls, but none were answered. For the first time in years, the galaxy was on its own. At first, many celebrated. The Varn declared a day of sovereignty, burning effigies of human soldiers. The Delari broadcast proclamations of independence. Even some council worlds toasted the end of Terran interference. But the celebrations didn't last. Without human patrols, the space lanes became dangerous again. Smugglers and mercenaries thrived. The sons of Kavar, though broken, inspired copycats, pirate lords who claimed to fight under their banner, preaching vengeance against the Deathworlders. Council forces tried to stop them, but their ships were slow, their soldiers untested, their command fractured. And when the colonies began to burn again, the stars fell silent once more. This time, not from awe, but from helplessness. On Daxer Prime, the council chamber was chaos. "We must send envoys to Earth," cried one delegate. "Beg them to return." "Never!" shouted another. "They abandoned us." "They saved you!" The shouting built, until the high speaker raised its voice over them all. "Enough! We will send a message. Not a plea, but a proposal. The humans must understand that this galaxy cannot live in their shadow forever, but nor can it survive their absence." When the transmission reached Earth, it was met with silence for nearly a week. Then finally, Admiral Kor appeared on the Council's holofeed. She stood alone, without insignia, her uniform plain. "You wanted to stand without us," she said, her tone even. "You said you needed to prove you could survive without Deathworlders at your borders. You've had your chance. What have you proven?" The Varn representative hissed. "We've proven that the galaxy must not depend on a single species for its survival." Kor's gaze hardened. "Then why are you calling me now?" The chamber fell silent. "You call us savages," she continued, her voice rising slightly. "You whisper that we are beasts who thrive on war. Maybe you're right. Maybe Earth is a death world, and maybe we're its reflection. But we didn't ask for this war. We didn't ask to be your executioners or your saviors. You made us both, and when we answered your call, we gave everything. So if you want our help now, understand this. We will come, but we won't come as servants. We will come as Deathworlders." The transmission cut out. A week later, when the Council's border worlds were under siege by raiders, the skies broke open. Human ships returned, not as an occupying fleet but as guardians. The Leviathan led the vanguard, its engines roaring through the dark. No one had requested its presence, yet every world it entered fell silent with relief. Human marines deployed with precision, rebuilding defenses, restoring order, and leaving just as swiftly as they came. They demanded no payment, no treaties, only a single message left behind on every liberated planet. Peace is not given. It's held. The Council realized then what humanity had become. Not rulers, not monsters, not conquerors, but something older, something primal, a shield forged from the hardest world in the known galaxy. Months later, as the stars settled once more into their quiet rhythm, Kor stood again on the Leviathan's observation deck. Earth hung before her blue and alive, untouched by the chaos beyond. Voss joined her in silence. "They're calling us heroes again," he said softly. Kor shook her head. "No, they're calling us necessary. Heroes fade. Necessity doesn't." He looked at her. "And when they stop needing us?" She smiled faintly, though her eyes never left the stars. "Then we'll rest. But not before." Out beyond the rim, a beacon lit up, a colony under attack. Kor turned to her officers. "Plot a course." The engines flared to life, a deep, steady hum filling the ship. And as the Leviathan moved into the dark once more, the stars above seemed to dim in reverence. The galaxy had learned a lesson carved in blood and silence. When humanity's Deathworlders took the field, the stars themselves held their breath.